Well, as you guys know, quite a busy week for combat sports, right? So we're going to start it off with the June 1st 5-on-5 boxing card taking place in Riyadh. And we're also going to do the UFC on a separate video. But for now, let's check out this little view right here and then talk a little bit of some boxing. While I was on my phone sort of looking at Nick Ball highlights, sort of analyzing the Ray Ford versus Nick Ball fight. Now, that right there is a fight that I'm watching closely and a fight I'm actually studying while looking at the highlights and some past footages of two men, for the simple fact that it is probably going to be the biggest 50-50 fight, in my opinion, in the whole entire card. And let me explain why. The way that these guys throw their shots, right? For one, Nick Ball is quite a firecracker. And that's not saying that in a very negative way, right? I'm saying this in the most positive way. Because not only does he know how to fight in a brawling kind of fury of a pace, but he can also really sit down on his shots in a very technical manner. In other words, he's just very sharp all around. The same thing that I noticed with Ray Ford. One thing that I did notice about Ray that is worth mentioning and understanding is that this guy finishes guys in the later rounds. He sort of has to work just a little bit in order to finish them off, but eventually he does. Now, with this particular fight, where you got a guy that's 18-0 versus a guy that's 14-0, I honestly don't see any of these two guys at the high level that they're at finishing each other. And as a result of that, I also think that in the near future, they are going to have their own rematches. I gotta tell you, there's a lot of fights in this particular card that on paper may be 50-50, but you gotta ask yourself if there's any of these fights in this particular 5-on-5 card that is going to, let's say, become a rematch on its own card, on its own headline somewhere down the road. And I think it's these guys, Nick Ball and Ray Ford. By the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with Ray Ford. He just seems to be the much more athletic fighter, better pedigree in terms of training in the U.S., and I think that is just going to lend itself to having a point advantage by the end of the fight. So I'm going to go with a decision with Ray Ford against Nick Ball. So moving on with the card. How about Hamza Shiraz versus Austin Ammo Williams? So I'm going to be very honest with you guys, right? And I'm a very honest person when I need to be, but I'm also a very biased person in a way where I can tell you that I'm going to have biasness towards this. And why is that? Well, for one, I honestly think that Hamza Shiraz has a great chance in winning this fight. In fact, I think he's going to win this fight for the simple fact that he is taller, he's got the range, and not only that, he's been showing that he knows how to finish guys, high-level people, in the first round, which is no easy task in doing that against Williams. First round, we did not expect that. We expected a devastating finish of some sort. We expected him to get some rounds in, but my goodness, we never expected him to do it in the first round, and that is high-level stuff. So you got to ask yourself, what does Ammo Williams offer that Liam Williams didn't? Don't be surprised if this ends very early as well. Hamza Shiraz by the first couple of rounds. The next fight that we got on this card right here. We got Filip Hrgović taking on Daniel Dubois. So this is an interesting matchup. Once again, we talk about all the 50-50 fights that are involved in this particular card. This is literally one of them, and this is the best example of that scenario. Why? Daniel Dubois boxed his behind off against Usyk. I understand that it came out in the results to which it did, but you also got to understand he looked great in the process. As the Brits say, gave a good account of himself. And not only that, really showed that he is at the top level of the heavyweight division. Now, Filip Hrgović, this is a guy who's still undefeated, has a win over Zhang. On top of that, has wins over... Let's take a look at some of the names that Hrgović has had victories over. And by the way, the Deontay Wilder-Zhang card is really awesome as well, right? That particular fight is going to be really interesting considering... By the way, I'm not done with Filip Hrgović yet. I'm just trying to pull up his record here. So he's fought Zhang, Dempsey McKen, Mark Diarm, okay, Rydell Booker, Mark Diamoro. Okay, so obviously the biggest name that Filip Hrgović has defeated was Zhang. And we all take a look at Zhang and how he does against Joyce, how he's been doing against all these other top-level names in the heavyweight division. Well, now in comes Deontay Wilder as a test to that. So, how do I see this fight with Daniel Dubois and Hrgović, though? The fact that Dubois has given a good account of himself means that there's a great chance he's not going to get knocked out. There is a chance, if there is a knockout, it's going to come from Filip Hrgović, and it's going to be Daniel Dubois on the receiving end of it. But if all else is everything that we understand Daniel Dubois to be, in terms of his performance against the best undisputed heavyweight champion of the world right now, this goes to a decision, but the technicality in the point system is going to favor Hrgović in the process. What else do we have on this card, on the 5-on-5? So we now talked about 3 fights, right? Now we're on to the main event and the co-main event. So the main event, which was supposed to be the original card of Dmitry Bivol and Arthur Beterbiev, is obviously not going to happen because of the injury that Arthur Beterbiev has suffered. And as the process goes, well, they bring in somebody who is of matching record to Dmitry Bivol, but at the same time, really not the same caliber of names that you can really compare. Bivol, we're talking about a guy that fought Canelo, okay, fought Ramirez, all these other big names. But again, 22-0 is 22-0 even in the modern standards of boxing, and you can't deny him of that. Which means, don't be surprised if this fight goes to a decision, but more than likely in the favor of Bivol, and sometime down the line just sharpens him up even more for the future clash with Arthur Beterbiev. Now, lastly, going into the main event, I think that this is potentially Deontay Wilder's last fight. I can tell you from a mental point of view why I'm saying that, and that's probably because of some comments that he's made in recent times where he said, sometimes I just don't feel like this earth is real, or I'm beyond this earth, or all these other spiritual mumbo-jumbo he has going on. Now, if you're a different fighter in a different mentality, in a different set of environment you grew up in, maybe this is good for you and it's a great indication of your focus. However, we're talking about Deontay Wilder. This is something out of the norm in anything that we know him to be. And anything that takes him out of the norm usually takes him out of that norm that knocks out Helenius in the first round. Fights like that. Dominic Brazil. Fights like that. His performance against Tyson Fury in the first fight. All of that is being taken away based on just his decline of being a lot more hesitant, having less pop in his shots, less explosiveness. And again, the age factor may not have anything to do with it, considering that heavyweights age very well. But you also got to take into consideration he's a small heavyweight. And even as slow as Zhang is, the longer this fight goes in the same similar fashion that you saw out of Joseph Parker, I gotta be honest with you guys, eventually he's gonna catch Deontay Wilder. Because Zhang is one of those fighters where the fight gets on any longer, he's gonna find that chin somehow. Just like Derek Chisora, right? He's that similar type of fighter in which that if the fight goes any longer, and with the slower pace that he lends himself to be, he just sees open shots in the later rounds that the other guy may not really notice. And this is what's going to happen to Deontay Wilder. But worse off, what is going to happen after Deontay Wilder gets clipped, knocked out, and finished in this fight? I got to tell you, that right there is going to be a great post-fight story to talk about. The drama that unfolds from that. But even more so exciting if, let's say, Deontay Wilder was to knock out Zhang. And do so in a fashion that allows him to call out Alexander Usyk. Because I saw True Jordy make a video saying that perhaps maybe it is this guy that has the only chance against Alexander Usyk because, hey, styles make fights. We saw how he looked against Deontay Wilder looked against Tyson Fury, but that's a different fight. We saw how he looked against Joseph Parker. Once again, a different fight, and a guy that trains with Tyson Fury that can give him some insights. So, you got to look at this fight and say that Deontay Wilder has a chance. But in all true to God honesty, he probably does. And if you really put me on a spot, which is where I'm at right now, looking at this fight from a very 50-50 point of view, yes, Zhang is slow, but powerful. Deontay Wilder has gotten slower, and we don't know if he's powerful. Which is why I have to give the fight to Zhang. Either by a decision, it's going to go two ways for Zhang. Either by a decision or an early stoppage. It's either one or the other, but favoring Zhang all the way based on the conclusions that I just presented to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Look out for my UFC 302 predictions and preview video just like this one for a jam-packed weekend of June 1st, 2024. UFC 302, and this one that I just covered, 5-on-5 series, Matchroom versus Queensbury Promotions. Boxing in the Riyadh season. Inshallah, we are out.